I'm going to put a number like 80% of the issues that we have between people is just because of miscommunication. We've misunderstood what someone else has said, and then we've taken offense to it, or we've seen it in a different light. And instead of stopping and thinking about, okay, I disagree with someone here, let me just make sure that I'm actually understanding what they say first before I try and refute what they say or argue with what they say. We just go straight back into, okay, we need to argue it. And then the other person does the same thing, and it just ratchets up until it gets like too hot to handle. And yeah, so something we could do, which is going back to computers, is a lot of the time, if you need good quality communication, you send back an acknowledgement that you've understood, that you've received that bit of information. And so in spoken languages, why can't we do the same thing? It's like, okay, you've said something. Let me just send back an acknowledgement that I understand what you're talking about. And this is one of the things that a lot of people that will teach you how to communicate better is to, okay, you hear what someone else has said, now repeat it back to them in your own words so that they understand that you've heard it correctly. And then in that way, if you say something and I'm like, hang on, that doesn't sound quite right, then I can correct that and make sure that what the message that is getting between us is accurate. And then at that point, if we have a disagreement, okay, now we can argue, we can disagree about things. But it should always be that first thing is to make sure that communication is as accurate as possible.
Yeah, agree. I mean, you know, I'm a big fan of, as you probably well know, of always trying to basically say back something that someone said to me that's maybe difficult to understand, like, or at least a little bit complex, I guess. And you just basically checking, am I seeing it the same way as them? And if not, where is the difference? And then narrowing down on that. And I think the earlier you can do in the conversation, the better, because, you know, going back to that gender thing, if you didn't look at, what I'm meaning by saying male or female is biological, if you didn't start off at that point, you can actually end up having an argument that's completely off on a tangent and you haven't actually resolved the root cause of the issue, the misunderstanding. So you can imagine, you know, they start talking about gender and not being accepting of different genders and all the rest. And yes, I am. And there can be a lot of confusion about that just because of base fundamental difference between how they're interpreting a particular word, I guess. So the quicker you can actually do that. So in my mind, as soon as you disagree on something, that's when you want to, all right, we disagree. Whereabouts is it that we disagree? Let's walk back. Don't get angry, be calm, and start to ask, do you mean this by this? Or, okay, if you don't mean that, please give me, you know, explain what you do mean by it. Because we can't just assume that everyone has the same interpretation of all these meanings. I don't know what the amount of words in a dictionary would be just in English. I'm guessing it would be in the order of maybe 1 million words or something. So
I wouldn't go that high, but
yeah,
thousands, tens of thousands possibly, yeah.
Tens of thousands. But either way, I think to have a conversation with the assumption that each of those words that you use in that conversation is interpreted in the same way you did with the other person is just asking for trouble, asking for problems. So as soon as there's something that you don't agree upon or that doesn't quite align to you, then it's incumbent to you. The first thing you should do is question, is to ask, is to open up a dialogue.
Yeah, especially, again, very good point. And I should repeat back to you what you said so that we know that we understand each other. But I'm sure from the way I follow on from it, you'll be able to detect if I've caught what you're throwing out. Especially going back to there's however many thousands of words, possibly millions, you may be right there. Remembering that majority of the words are abstract. We have a kind of an idea, a feeling about what they mean, but there's nothing we can objectively point to and say that's what that word means. Like for an example, I was thinking about this earlier. How do I get this point across? For an example, I want you to explain to me objectively what example means.
Without using the word example. Yeah, it's. I can't think on the fly of something to be able to do that. Yeah.
You could give me examples of things, but that isn't actually explaining what the word example means. What happens is I'm formulating an idea about what the word example means by the various instantiations of that word that you've created. But that in itself is not, you can never point to it and say that is what example is.
Yeah, I really like that word instantiation, and I guess we use it because of programming. But from a simpleton term, it means that you've actually used the term in different paraphrases, let's say, or paragraphs or communication. You've used that term in different ways as you've talked through many different conversations. And what someone does is try to generalize what that meaning is across all its uses. And so you start to narrow down a definition. Actually, in fact, I think this is how people do learn language. If you look at a kid, that's what it's doing. It's looking at all the ways in which that vocal, that audio symbol, or however you want to describe it, that noise is being used, and the corresponding actions around that, and then it's generalizing what that term actually means. And sooner or later, like mummy, everyone calls that visual person over there, that visual person, they all say mum. They use that audio signal. So that must be mum. So I must have to say that, and then everyone knows what I mean. So you're right. Every time we use a term, you're basically using each time it's being used to generalize what its meaning actually is.
100%. I think that is how we learn. I mean, that's how I perceive it. And from what I've heard other people say, I think they see it the similar way, where you're seeing various examples of what that word actually means. And from each example, you're seeing what is similar between them. And you're saying that is what the word is. What is similar across all these different instances of this word, that is what it is. So yeah, like when you say mummy, it's a feeling even that you get from this person. It's not even necessarily something objective that we can say they have certain look, they whatever. It could be just a feeling that you get when you're around them. It's a feeling, it's a smell, it's a whatever we can sense, whatever we sense about an environment, that all forms how we understand a word.
Yeah, and it shows how cultural differences become a challenge. Like, so one of the things is I spent about 3 months in Texas, and I realized certain terminology was not applied the same way. And that was just a cultural difference. So like you said, the generalization of how that term is being used. So a couple of ones that I do remember is like I went into a shop I saw like a vegan pie. And so I ordered it thinking it was like an actual, in Australia, what we call like a meat pie, like a baked pie. But in their case, it was actually a pizza. And so I ended up getting a pizza, and I was like, oh, okay, cool. Got that. Chips was another one. So if I asked for chips in Australia, that can mean hot chips as well. In America, it's basically always used for the cold crisps, in a packet, and chips are called fries. Or what was another one? I think those terms they're general. I don't know what chip says in the dictionary. It's just something culturally. Toilet, and they use something else.
Bathroom.
I think bathroom or water closet. Maybe there's something. There's some other term. I think it's water closet. I can't remember now. But it's interesting when you say certain things that you're used to in your culture, and it can be using the same language, which is English, and you apply it in a different culture, how the generalization of that term has changed somewhat its meaning to the local environment, I guess. And so, yeah, I mean, I've made mistakes by thinking I'm using the right terminology, and in my culture it would have been completely fine, but in another culture it wouldn't be. So, slang and all these other things are built from that.
That's a really good pickup, that even using the same symbols, which would be the same word in various locations, in various cultures, we've ascribed different meanings to them because the way we've formulated our understanding of what they are is through experiences that differ widely depending on where you are and what culture you're in. So yeah, that was a really good pickup, and I like that you made that addition.